You useless wretch! You drooled on my Persian rug! Lorraine's shrill scream cut through the cold air of the room, even before her hand came down. The sound of the slap was dry, sharp, echoing through the cold walls of the mansion like a gunshot. His stepmother's heavy hand, laden with solid gold rings, struck Sterling's motionless cheekbone squarely. His head turned slightly to the side with the violence of the impact, inert like a rag doll. He had no strength to bring it back. He could do nothing. Sterling felt his skin burn, as if seared by a branding iron. He tasted the metallic tang of blood in his mouth where his tooth had cut the inside of his lip. But the physical pain, however sharp, was nothing compared to the humiliation that calcified his soul. Inside that paralyzed shell, Sterling's mind roared. He screamed with hatred, with helplessness, with shame. "Don't hit me! I'm a man! I own this house! Get your hands off me!" He screamed in his mind, with a powerful voice that no one heard. In the real world, the only sound that came from his throat was a pathetic gurgle, a low, wet moan, choked on his own saliva, that sounded like an animal being slaughtered. Lorraine looked at him with undisguised disgust. Her upper lip trembled with contempt. She did not see the stepson who was once a brilliant businessman, who ran marathons and graced magazine covers. She only saw a piece of spoiled meat that prevented her from spending the inheritance as she pleased. "Look what you did," she hissed, walking to a dirty bucket in the corner of the room. She fished a grimy floor rag out of the grey water. Without wringing it properly, she returned to the bed. With unnecessary brutality, she rubbed the rough, foul-smelling cloth on Sterling's mouth. The smell of old bleach and mold invaded his nose, making his stomach churn. The urge to vomit came, but he could not vomit. If he did, he would choke and die right there, asphyxiated on his own gastric juices. Perhaps it would be a relief. She rubbed harder, scratching the sensitive skin of his chin, mixing the drool with the dirt from the floor. "You disgust me, Sterling. Disgusting." She spat the words, splattering saliva on his face. 2 years in this bed. 2 years messing up my life and my son's. Why don't you just die already? It would be so much easier, so much cleaner. Sterling Vance fixed his gaze on a patch of mold on the ceiling. It was his only refuge, trying to leave his body, pretending he wasn't there. But it was impossible. The prison was perfect. He felt everything. He felt the damp, cold diaper that no one had changed since the night before. He felt the terrible cramp in his right calf, a muscle knot that felt like a knife slowly twisting, and he couldn't simply stretch his leg to relieve it. Lorraine finished cleaning and threw the wet cloth onto his chest, soaking his old t-shirt. "It's hot in here, isn't it?" she said with a cruel smile, wiping her dry forehead. "But I'm sweating. I'm going to cool things down a bit." She picked up the air conditioner remote. Sterling saw the digital display change. 22 degrees. 20 degrees. 18 degrees. 16 degrees. The turbo mode was activated. The blast of cold air hit him directly. Then, with a swift movement, Lorraine grabbed the edge of the thin sheet that covered Sterling's legs and ripped it off violently. He lay there, exposed, wearing only the t-shirt soaked by the dirty rag and the bulky adult diaper. The cold struck him like a physical lash. The hairs on his atrophied arms stood on end immediately. His body began to tremble, involuntary spasms that gently shook the bed. The cold ached in his bones, in his stiff joints. It was a slow, invisible torture that left no marks for forensics. "This way you'll be preserved better," she laughed, a dry, joyless laugh. Before leaving, she picked up the television remote. She turned the volume almost to maximum, but she didn't put on a news program or a movie. She left it on an off-air channel. Shh! The white noise filled the room, drowning out any sound, any thought. It was a chainsaw for the brain. "It won't be long now, darling," she said, stopping at the door and looking at her wristwatch. "The lawyer said this week we'll settle everything. Soon you'll stop being a burden." She turned off the light, left and slammed the door. Sterling was left alone, in the dark, shivering from the cold, his teeth chattering, in pain, and with that infernal noise preventing him from even praying in peace. A warm tear trickled from the corner of his eye, contrasting with the icy air. God, if you exist, please, make my heart stop now. I can't bear another second. 3 floors below that room of horrors, the service gate opened with a metallic creak. Sadie adjusted her worn bag on her shoulder and wiped the sweat from her forehead. The afternoon sun was strong outside, but the shadow of that estate felt cold. She was nervous. Her hands, calloused from working with chemicals since she was 15, trembled slightly. She needed that job. She needed it like she needed air. Her grandmother, Grandma Etta, had an expired blood pressure medication prescription on the Formica table, and the refrigerator at home only held a bottle of water and half a cabbage. The house manager, Mr. Thorne, a short man with a weasel-like face, looked her up and down with professional disdain. He wrinkled his nose at her sneakers, clean but with worn soles and peeling at the sides. "Are you the Sadie the agency sent?" he asked, without even looking her in the eye, checking a clipboard. "Yes, sir, Sadie Miller. The rules here are simple, girl." He started walking quickly, and she had to quicken her pace to keep up. "Keep your mouth shut, head down. What you see here stays here. If you steal a bobby pin, we'll call the police, and you'll leave here in handcuffs straight to the slammer. Understood?" "Yes, sir, I'm honest. I just want to work." They passed through the commercial kitchen, immense and gleaming, where a cook chopped vegetables without looking at them. Mr. Thorne guided her to the servants' staircase, narrow and windowless. "Your section is the 3rd floor, the invalid suite." "Problem?" Sadie dared to ask, her voice faltering slightly. "Lorraine's stepson. The vegetable," Mr. Thorne said naturally, as if speaking of a broken, dusty piece of furniture. "Nobody likes to go in there. The hired nurses do the bare minimum, quickly change his diaper, and disappear. Your job is to keep the floor clean and dust. The smell in there is strong." They climbed the stairs. With each floor, the air seemed to grow heavier, more oppressive. When they reached the 3rd floor hallway, Sadie heard a loud, unbearable wheezing coming from a door at the end. Mr. Thorne opened the door. A blast of cold air hit Sadie's face as if she had stepped into a freezer. Immediately afterward, the smell came. Acrid, old urine, medicine, mold, concentrated sadness. "There's the job," Mr. Thorne pointed, pushing a cleaning cart inside. "Clean everything. Dust. Wipe everything down with strong disinfectant to kill that smell of death. And a warning, girl, don't look him in the eye. It gives me the creeps. They're dead fish eyes. Do your job and get out. I'll be timing you." The manager turned his back and left, leaving the door ajar. Sadie stood still in the middle of the room, hugging her own arms because of the sudden chill. The TV noise deeply bothered her, grating on her nerves. The first thing she did, even before picking up the broom, was to grab the remote control from the nightstand and turn off that cursed static. The silence that followed was heavy, almost solid. Sadie turned to the bed, and what she saw made her heart clench. There was a man there, still young, perhaps in his early 30s, but he was purple from the cold. His entire body was shaking on the plastic mattress without any covers. His shirt was wet on his chest. He was dirty. There was a clear red 5-finger mark on his pale face. His lip was swollen and had dried blood on it. Sadie forgot her fear of the manager. She forgot the orders to not look. In that moment, her humanity spoke louder than her need for a paycheck. "Oh, my God," she whispered, bringing her hand to her mouth. She saw his eyes. They were not dead fish eyes. They were wide, brown eyes, fixed on the ceiling, but they seemed to scream in panic. They were moist, overflowing with a pain that could not be contained in that room. "Are they trying to freeze you, sir?" She spoke softly, looking at the door to ensure Mr. Thorne was not returning. Sadie ran to the window and opened the heavy velvet curtains. The afternoon sunlight streamed in, revealing the dust dancing in the air. The room gained color. Then she looked for the air conditioner remote and turned it off. But he was still trembling. His teeth chattered, clack, clack, clack. Sadie looked around desperately. There was no blanket. The closet drawers were open and empty. They had taken everything. What kind of people do this to a human being? She murmured, feeling a hot anger rise up her neck. Without a second thought, she took off her own grey wool cardigan that she wore over her uniform. It was an old piece bought at a thrift store with pills on the fabric, but it was warm and smelled of the coconut soap she used at home. She approached the bed cautiously. "Excuse me, okay?" she said with a sweet voice. "I'm not a nurse, I'm Sadie, the new housekeeper, but I'm not going to let you chatter your teeth like that." With utmost delicacy, Sadie covered his chest and arms with her cardigan. The sleeves were short for his long arms, but they covered what was essential. Then she found the sheet tossed in a corner of the floor, shook it to remove the dust, and covered his legs. She adjusted the fabric around his shoulders, tucking the ends beneath his body to create a cocoon. There. It will pass. The cold will pass. For the first time in months, Sterling felt something that was not pain or contempt. He felt the weight of the wool on his chest. It did not smell like a hospital. It smelled like life. It smelled like someone who cared. The trembling of his body began to subside, not because he was physically warm yet, but because the panic was receding. Someone had asked, "Excuse me?" Someone had spoken to him, and not about him. Sterling stopped praying to die. For a second, he only wanted to keep listening to that voice. Sadie grabbed the dustcloth and began cleaning frantically, afraid that Mr. Thorne would come in and see her idle, but her eyes kept returning to the bed every 10 seconds. The mark on his face was turning purple. The blood on his lip bothered him. She could tell by the way his breathing changed. "I can't leave it like this," she whispered. She dragged the cleaning cart in front of the door, leaving it just ajar. If someone pushed it, the cart would make noise and give her time to cover up. She filled a small basin with warm water from the faucet in the adjoining bathroom. She took a clean washcloth from her own cart. "You're hurt," she said, approaching again, her heart pounding fast from the fear of being caught. "I'll clean it up quickly, okay? If it hurts, please forgive me." Sadie wet the towel and dabbed the corner of his mouth. Her touch was light, hesitant. Lorraine, when she touched him, was aggressive. The nurses were mechanical. But Sadie was caring. She cleaned the dried blood with patience. She wiped the warm towel across his forehead, removing the cold, oily sweat. She adjusted his hair, which was matted to his forehead, combing the dark strands back with her fingers. Sterling felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to cry, but crying required a respiratory effort he barely had. He focused his gaze on her. He wanted to imprint the face of this angel on his brain. She was a simple young woman with dark hair, with rebellious curls escaping her bun. She did not have the artificial beauty of the women he used to date. She had a tired, real beauty. "I know you're listening," Sadie whispered, looking deep into his eyes as she dried his face. "Nobody has eyes like that. So deep. Unless they're screaming inside. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry they treat you this way." At that exact moment, the bedroom door was shoved open forcefully. The cleaning cart hit the wall with a bang. Sadie jumped back, hiding the towel behind her back and grabbing the duster in a reflex motion, pretending to clean the headboard. It was Bryce, Lorraine's son. He stumbled in slightly, holding a lowball glass with amber liquid in one hand and a lit cigarette in the other. It was 2 in the afternoon, but he already reeked of a distillery. He wore a linen shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, sweating. "What's all that racket?" he grumbled, his voice slurred. "Oh, we have a visitor in the mausoleum." Bryce entered the room, ignoring the no-smoking rule. The cigarette ashes fell onto the plush carpet that Sadie had not yet vacuumed. "Are you the new slave?" he asked, his bloodshot eyes scanning Sadie's body with a repulsive leer. "I am the cleaner, sir." "Sadie," she replied with her head down, gripping the mop handle. "Sadie," he repeated, taking a sip of whiskey. Then he looked at the bed and laughed. "How's it going, little brother? Comfortable? I see you got a cheap thrift store cardigan. How ridiculous. It suits you now." Bryce walked over to the bed. Sadie felt her stomach clench. She took a tiny step forward, a protective instinct, but stopped. She was a nobody there. "Are you in love with the vegetable girl?" Bryce sneered, noticing her tension. "Don't waste your time. He's good for nothing." His brain turned to mush. Bryce took a deep drag from his cigarette and, in a gesture of gratuitous cruelty, leaned in and blew the thick smoke directly into Sterling's face. Sterling could not cough. He could not close his eyes. He could not turn his face. The smoke entered his nostrils and eyes, burning like pepper. His eyes instantly teared up from the chemical irritation. Sterling felt a murderous rage. If he could move a finger, just one, he would gouge out Bryce's eyes. "You shouldn't do that." Sadie's voice came out before she could think. Bryce stopped and looked at her, his eyebrows raised in surprise. "What did you say?" Sadie trembled, but she did not back down. "The smoke. It bothers him. He's crying, sir." Bryce let out a loud, dry laugh. "He cries? He's a vegetable, my dear, a rotten vegetable. Want to see?" Bryce raised his hand with the cigarette. The tip was a live ember, red and hot. He aimed at Sterling's leg, covered by the thin sheet. "I'll put it out here to see if he complains. If he screams, you get a raise." He began to lower his hand with the lit cigarette toward Sterling's thigh. Sadie's heart pounded. "No!" she screamed. In an unthinking reflex, Sadie slipped purposefully with the wet mop, pushing the cleaning cart forcefully. The cart hit Bryce's legs. The shock made Bryce lose his balance. The cigarette flew from his hand and fell to the floor. The whiskey spilled on his shirt. "You idiot!" Bryce roared, trying to clean himself. "Look what you did! I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry." Sadie quickly bent down, feigning desperation, and stepped on the cigarette butt, extinguishing it and kicking it away under the bed. "The floor was wet. I slipped. 1,000 apologies." Bryce looked at her with hatred, but was more concerned with the stain on his imported linen shirt. "You're incompetent. Get out of my sight before I slap you." He looked at Sterling with disgust. "You're lucky, vegetable. But I'll be back tomorrow." He stomped out of the room, cursing. As soon as he disappeared down the hall, Sadie collapsed onto the floor. Her legs could no longer support her. She was breathless. She had risked her job, perhaps her freedom. She looked up at the bed. Sterling was looking at her. And for the first time, amidst the stinging tears from the smoke, there was something more. It wasn't a vacant stare. It was a focused gaze. Intense. He was looking at her the way a man looks at the woman who saved his life. "That was a close call, Mr. Sterling," she whispered, trembling. "But I won't let them burn you. I won't." The following days dragged on in constant tension. Sadie knew she was on thin ice. She couldn't just stay in the room reading books, as she would have liked. The risk was too high. Mr. Thorne passed by in the hall every hour like a jailer. So Sadie adapted her routine. She brought life into the room in the margins of her work. While dusting the empty shelves, she recited things to Sterling. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," she whispered softly, wiping the furniture with a flannel cloth, always keeping an eye on the open door. "My grandma says this psalm protects against bad people, Mr. Vance, and this house needs it." On Thursday, she brought a small jar of cheap moisturizing cream hidden in her apron pocket. She pretended she was tidying the sheet. As she smoothed the bed, her hands slipped beneath the fabric and found his hands. Sterling's hands were stiff, his fingers curled like claws, cold as marble. "I'm going to put some cream on, okay?" she whispered, looking toward the hallway. "Just for a moment." She massaged his hands with vigor and speed, trying to warm them. There was no miracle. His fingers did not magically straighten. 2 years of atrophy would not disappear in 3 days. But his skin, previously grey and dry, began to take on a more pinkish tone. Her touch brought blood to the surface. "See?" Sadie would say, smiling at Sterling as she pretended to adjust his pillow. "Your hand isn't cold anymore. The blood is flowing. You're alive in there." Sterling spent 23 hours a day waiting for those fragmented 15 minutes of attention she gave him during cleaning. He began to fight against his own body. He sent desperate commands from his brain to his muscles. "Move! Thank her! Move, damn it!" But his body remained a concrete prison. However, his gaze changed. Sadie noticed. When she entered the room, his eyes immediately followed her. If she went left, his eyes went. If she went right, his eyes went. It was the only thing he could move voluntarily. His pupils. On Friday morning, while she was cleaning the window, she pretended to read a passage from a paperback book she had brought. The pirate said the treasure was buried where the shadow of the cross fell. She read a sentence and hid the book in her bra when she heard footsteps. It was just the cook passing by. Sadie sighed in relief and looked at Sterling. His eyes were fixed on the spot where she had hidden the book, as if asking her to continue. "You like stories, don't you?" She smiled sadly. "You know, Mr. Sterling, here in this house you're the richest man, but you seem the poorest. Back in my tenements we share our bread, and no one freezes to death alone." She leaned closer to adjust the collar of his shirt. "You're the only man who truly listens to me. My ex-husband, he only knew how to yell and order me around. You listen to me with your soul. Thank you for letting me take care of you." Sterling felt a tear roll down. He wanted to shout, "I love you." He wanted to shout, "Thank you." But he only blinked. Once, slowly, as if saying yes. Sadie stopped. She saw the blink. It wasn't a quick reflex, it was slow, deliberate. Her heart skipped a beat, but before she could test it, she heard agitated voices in the hallway. Sadie grabbed the duster and hurried into the hallway, pretending to polish the stair railing away from the room so as not to appear suspicious. Lorraine's study door was ajar. Her stepmother's voice came out shrill, laden with suppressed rage. "I don't care if he's incorruptible, Dr. Whitmore." Lorraine was speaking on the phone, pacing back and forth. Sadie could see her shadow moving on the hallway floor. Sadie slowed her hand on the railing, straining to listen. "What do you mean, automatic?" Lorraine stopped. "Repeat that." There was a tense silence. "You mean, if Sterling completes 2 years of incapacitation tonight at midnight, the company's bylaws trigger a mandatory external audit, and there's no way to cancel it?" Sadie held her breath. "And they're going to search everything. The accounts in the Cayman Islands, the embezzlement from the plant's renovation." Lorraine's voice trembled. "They'll discover the vault is empty, you imbecile. I'm going to be arrested." Sadie felt a chill down her spine. She knew Lorraine spent a lot, but she hadn't imagined they had stolen from the company to the point of fearing the slammer. "No, no," Lorraine said, her voice dropping to a dangerously calm tone. "Listen here. The audit only happens if there's an incapacitated partner who needs a guardian. What if there's no partner? What if the partner ceases to exist before midnight?" The dustcloth slipped from Sadie's hand and fell silently to the floor. "Exactly. Natural causes. His heart is weak, everyone knows that. A cardiac arrest during sleep, no one will suspect a thing. He's already a corpse anyway. We're just moving up the burial by a few hours." Lorraine hung up the phone. Sadie heard the sound of the receiver being slammed onto the table. "Friday night," Lorraine said aloud to herself, her voice echoing in the empty hallway. "Tonight, Sterling. Tonight you're going to hell, and I'm keeping paradise. Goodbye, dear stepson." Lorraine started walking towards the study door. Sadie snatched the cloth from the floor in a swift movement and squeezed into an alcove where a potted plant stood, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would break her ribs. Lorraine walked past the hallway, heading towards the staircase without seeing Sadie. As soon as the stepmother disappeared from view, Sadie slid down the wall to the floor, her legs trembling uncontrollably. They are going to kill him. Today. In a few hours. Panic seized her. She looked at her cheap wristwatch. It was almost 4 in the afternoon. Her shift ended at 5. If she left, Sterling would die alone that night. She remembered his eyes, his slow blink, the way he looked at her as if she were his only hope. She stood up. Fear gave way to a cold determination, the kind only those with nothing left to lose can feel. "Not while I breathe," she whispered. She walked back to Sterling's quarters. She did not know how. She did not know with what weapons, but she knew that night would be long, and that she needed to do something drastic. Sadie closed the door to Sterling's quarters, her heart pounding in her throat. She dragged the heavy cleaning cart to barricade the entrance, caring little for the rules, or if Mr. Thorne would appear, shouting. The time for caution was over. That room was now a war bunker. She ran to the bed. Sterling was exactly as she had left him, motionless, staring at the ceiling, but with that glint of panic in his eyes, as if he could smell the death that haunted the house. Cold sweat glistened on his forehead. Sadie leaned over him, holding his face between her rough, calloused hands. Her hands trembled so much that she was afraid she would hurt him. "Sterling," she whispered. Her voice choked with the sobs she tried to swallow. "They are going to kill you. I heard them. Lorraine, she said on the phone that it's tonight." Sterling's eyes widened. His pupils dilated instantly. Pure, liquid fear filled his gaze. He knew. Deep down, he had always known this day would come. "I don't have much time. My shift is almost over," Sadie continued, speaking quickly, stumbling over her words, glancing at the barricaded door every second. "I need to go to the police. But they won't believe a cleaning lady from the tenements against the owner of the mansion. They'll laugh in my face. They'll say I'm crazy." She choked back her tears and looked deep into his eyes, searching for the connection she had felt earlier. Unless you help me." Sterling Vance looked at her. His mind raced. How could he help? He was a stone, a dead weight. "I saw you blink, Mr. Sterling, earlier, when I said I would take care of you. It wasn't a reflex, was it?" She gently squeezed his cheeks, pleading, "Please, for heaven's sake. If you're in there, if you understand me, blink for me. Blink once, just once." The room fell into absolute silence. Only the distant hum of the refrigerator in the hallway and the sound of a car passing on the street outside. Sterling concentrated all his vital energy, all his soul. He sent the command to his heavy eyelids, which felt like they were made of lead. Close. Open. Now. It felt like he was trying to lift a car with his eyelashes. He closed his eyes and opened them. A blink. Slow. Deliberate. Heavy. Sadie let out a loud sob, bringing her hands to her mouth to stifle a cry of joy. "You're in there?" Sadie cried, smiling through her tears, stroking Sterling's hair. "Thank God you're in there, I knew it." She quickly wiped her face with her uniform sleeve. There was no time for emotion. The clock was ticking against them. "Listen, we need a code. If I ask a question, and the answer is yes, you blink once. If it's no, you blink twice, very quickly. Can you manage?" Sterling blinked once. "Yes." "Do you want to live?" Sterling blinked once, forcefully, almost closing his entire eye. "Do you trust me to get you out of this?" Sterling blinked once, and a solitary tear rolled down the corner of his eye, wetting the pillow. Sadie felt an overwhelming wave of responsibility. The life of that man, that human being trapped in his own body, was literally in her calloused hands. "Then we will fight," she said, kissing his forehead. A firm kiss, a promise, from mother to son, from woman to man. I will not let that witch lay a finger on you. Sadie looked at the wall clock. 4:15 p.m. 45 minutes remained until the end of her shift. If she left now, Lorraine would grow suspicious. If she stayed, she would be there when the service began and would not be able to seek outside help. She needed a guarantee, a safeguard for his life. She reached into the deep pocket of her apron beneath the cleaning cloth and pulled out her personal cell phone. It was a simple device, with a spiderweb crack across the screen, but she took meticulous care of it. "I will leave my cell phone here," she said to Sterling, showing him the device. "If I go to the police and they do not believe me, I need someone to hear what is going to happen here. Good thing I put $10 of credit on it yesterday," she murmured, relieved. "The 4G is working. I'll be able to use the voice assistant." She looked around, searching for a hidden outlet. She found one behind the heavy solid wood headboard, near the floor, hidden by the long velvet curtain. It was perfect. No one would see it. She knelt down and plugged in the charger. The cell phone chirped softly. "I'll leave it back here, well hidden," she explained, tucking the device between the mattress and the headboard frame. It was invisible to anyone standing in the room, but the microphone was facing outward, able to pick up any sound. She quickly configured the voice assistant. "Okay, Google." The cell phone's indicator light came on. "That's it. It's activated and listening." She stood up and held Sterling's hand, squeezing his cold fingers. "Sterling, pay attention. This is very important. This cell phone is your weapon. It's connected to the internet. If they come in here to do what they said they're going to do, and I haven't come back yet with the police, I need you to make noise." Sterling looked at her, confused. "Noise? Any noise. Try to moan. Try to clench your teeth. Try to make that sound with your throat. If you make noise, the cell phone will activate. Or if I manage to call it, it will answer automatically on speakerphone because I set it up that way. Do you understand?" Sterling blinked once. He understood. That plastic rectangle hidden behind his head was his only connection to the world of the living. "I have another cell phone here in my pocket, that old one I only use for music, which doesn't have a SIM card," Sadie said, patting her other pocket and showing an even more damaged device with a black screen. "I'll keep this one in my hand to record Lorraine if I run into her in the hallway. If she catches me, she'll think this is my only phone." It was a risky plan, but it was the only one she had. She unlocked the door and carefully moved the cart out of the way. "Be safe. I'll be back. I swear on Grandma Etta's life that I'll be back." She left the room, leaving Sterling alone again. But now the silence in the room was not empty. There was a small green light blinking behind the bed, watching. Sadie tiptoed down the servants' staircase. She needed to find Lorraine. She needed to record the confession with the decoy phone, the music one, to take to the district precinct. Upon reaching the entrance hall, hidden behind an ornamental plant, she heard the doorbell ring. The housekeeper opened the door. A tall, bald man carrying a worn leather doctor's bag entered. He didn't look like someone who saved lives. He looked like someone who charged a high price for silence. "Dr. Whitmore." Lorraine appeared at the top of the stairs, hurrying down, her high heels clicking on the marble. "I'm glad you came quickly. You said it was urgent, Lorraine." The doctor spoke softly, looking around. "Has the plan changed?" "The deadline is tighter," she replied, moving closer to him and lowering her voice. Sadie leaned in to listen, pressing the record button on her old cell phone. "I need you to examine him now. I want to make sure his heart won't withstand the medication we're going to administer tonight, and I want to be absolutely certain he won't feel anything. I don't want any surprises, like him waking up in the middle of it and screaming. The gardener is still outside." "Let's go upstairs," the doctor said coldly. Sadie felt her blood run cold. They were going upstairs. They were going to touch him. Sadie waited for them to climb a few steps and then followed, keeping a safe distance, crawling up the steps to avoid being seen. They entered Sterling's quarters, and to Sadie's despair, Lorraine closed the door. Sadie rushed to the door and pressed her ear against the solid wood. Her phone was recording. Inside, Sterling saw his stepmother enter with the man he vaguely recognized. He was a family doctor, a scoundrel who issued fake medical notes for his father to evade taxes or avoid subpoenas. "Hello, young man," Dr. Whitmore said, without emotion, opening his bag on the nightstand. He took out a cold stethoscope and a reflex hammer. "Let's see how you're doing today." Lorraine crossed her arms impatiently, tapping her foot on the floor. "Get on with it. This new cleaner has been attending to him all day, said he looked more flushed." "I'm afraid she might have noticed a reaction. If he's conscious, Dr. Whitmore, we'll have to change our method." "Reaction? Impossible. His brain stem was liquefied, Lorraine." The doctor chuckled, pulling on his latex gloves. "But we'll test for deep sensation. It's the definitive test." The doctor approached. Sterling smelled cheap antiseptic and cigarette smoke clinging to his clothes. "If he feels pain, his pupil will dilate, or his heart rate will increase," the doctor explained, looking at the heart monitor beside the bed. Sterling knew what was at stake. Sadie had said, "If I ask and it's yes, blink once." But now, the game was different. If he reacted, Lorraine would know he was conscious. And if she knew he heard everything, she wouldn't wait until night. She would suffocate him right there with the pillow. "Don't react, don't react. You are a stone. You are ice," Sterling screamed to himself. The doctor took a sharp metal instrument from his bag. It looked like a surgical scalpel or a small ice pick. "I'm going to stimulate the nail bed. It hurts like hell for someone who's alive. It's a pain the brain can't ignore." Dr. Whitmore picked up Sterling's left index finger. And then, with sadistic force, he pressed the metal tip right at the base of the nail, piercing the sensitive skin. The pain was excruciating. It was as if a hot nail was being hammered into his finger bone. Sterling's primitive instinct was to pull his hand away. His brain screamed the command, "Pull! Scream!" But the will to live was stronger. He locked his body. He forced every muscle, every nerve, to remain dead. He visualized the image of Sadie smiling at him. The heart monitor began to beep faster. Beep, 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 beep. "Look!" Lorraine pointed, her eyes shining with suspicion. His heart sped up. He felt it. "Hold on," Dr. Whitmore said, staring fixedly into Sterling's eyes, looking for pupil dilation. "It could be an autonomic reflex. The body reacts on its own." Sterling faced Dr. Whitmore. He mentally relaxed his breathing. He forced himself to think of a calm lake, of the lavender scent from Sadie's clothes. The pain in his finger was excruciating, throbbing. Warm blood trickled down his finger, but he kept his eyes still, empty, glazed over. Beep, beep, beep. The monitor returned to its normal rhythm as Sterling controlled his panic. Dr. Whitmore released his finger. A drop of blood fell onto the white sheet, making a small but visible red stain. "Nothing," Dr. Whitmore concluded, removing his gloves. "It was just a spasm." His pupil did not change. "He feels nothing, Lorraine. He is a piece of meat. You can proceed with the plan tonight. His heart is truly weak. It will stop in seconds with the right dose of potassium." "Excellent." Lorraine smiled, relieved, not even noticing the drop of blood on the sheet. "So everything is set. We will see each other at the funeral." They left the room laughing. Outside, Sadie had to dive into a linen closet in the hallway to avoid being seen. She trembled, clutching the towels, listening to the footsteps fade away. She emerged from the closet pale. She looked at the old cell phone in her hand. The recording was poor, muffled by the door. Voices could be heard, but the words potassium and death were mixed with the hum of the hallway air conditioning. It wasn't the conclusive proof she had hoped for. "Damn it!" she whispered. But she had seen, she had heard. She was the witness. She ran to the staircase. It was 5 p.m., time to leave and get the police. Sadie reached the kitchen, ready to punch out and rush away. Her plan was to go straight to the district precinct, but when she reached the service door, Mr. Thorne was there, blocking the exit with his arms crossed. And he wasn't alone. 2 armed private security guards stood beside him, and Lorraine was there too, leaning against the marble island, swirling a glass of red wine in her hand. Sadie stopped abruptly, her sneakers squeaking on the floor. The atmosphere in the kitchen was icy. "Leaving already, dear?" Lorraine asked with a serpentine smile. "My shift is over, ma'am," Sadie replied, clutching her purse to her chest. Inside the purse was the old cell phone with the poor recording. The good cell phone was safe behind Sterling's bed. "That's a shame." Lorraine took a sip of wine. "Because something of mine went missing today. A ring. A diamond solitaire worth more than your entire life and that of your whole family." Sadie felt the floor drop out from under her. It was the ploy. The old ploy to frame the maid and discredit her. "I didn't take anything, ma'am. You can search me. I am honest." "Oh, we will search!" Lorraine gave Mr. Thorne a sharp gesture. The manager advanced violently and snatched the purse from Sadie's hand. "Hey, don't rip it!" Sadie yelled. Mr. Thorne turned the purse upside down on top of the stainless steel kitchen table. Everything fell out with a clatter. The old wallet, the house keys, a package of crackers, the old cell phone with a black screen, and clinking on the metal, a white gold ring with a huge stone. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Sadie looked at the ring. She had never seen that in her life. "Well, look at that," Lorraine said, feigning theatrical shock. "The gutter rat has long claws." "That's not mine," Sadie cried out, her voice rising an octave. "Someone put it there. I left my purse in the open locker room all day. You set me up." "You're the only new person here," Lorraine said, cold as ice, "and the only one with free access to the rooms. Mr. Thorne, call the police now. I want this thief caught red-handed." "No!" Sadie lunged for the old cell phone on the table, but one of the security guards grabbed her arm and threw her against the wall. "You don't understand. It's a trap. She wants to get me out of here because she's going to kill Mr. Sterling." Lorraine laughed, a loud laugh which echoed in the kitchen. "Did you hear that? Besides being a thief, she's schizophrenic, accusing her employer of murder. Poor thing. It must be the crack." "I don't use drugs. Let me go." Sadie struggled, but the guard was enormous. "Dr. Whitmore was here. They pricked his finger. Go see. His finger is bleeding." Lorraine hardened her gaze. She picked up Sadie's old cell phone from the table. "And this?" Lorraine looked at the broken device. "Proof of the crime? Perhaps it has photos of the house to pass on to her accomplices. Mr. Thorne, hand this over to the police as well." Sadie felt a paradoxical relief. "They think this is my only cell phone. The good cell phone, with the chip and the voice assistant, was still upstairs. The secret weapon was safe. Take her to the gatehouse. Wait for the police outside. I don't want these riffraff yelling in my kitchen and ruining my dinner." The security guards dragged Sadie Miller out. She kicked and screamed, trying to cling to the door frames. "Sterling! Sterling! Don't sleep! They're going to kill you! Make noise!" Her voice echoed through the house, rising through the elevator shaft, passing through the cracks. Upstairs, in the silent room, Sterling Vance heard. He heard the muffled screams. "Sterling, make noise!" And then silence returned. Heavy, deadly. He was alone. The only person who knew the truth had just been taken away, and his finger throbbed, dripping another drop of blood onto the sheet, which Lorraine Galloway hadn't even noticed yet. 20 minutes later, the red and blue lights of a police cruiser illuminated the mansion's garden. Sadie Miller was sitting on the gatehouse floor, her wrists aching where the security guard had squeezed them. When she saw the police officers, she jumped to her feet. "Officer, for heaven's sake!" She ran to the bars. "It's all a lie! They planted the ring! It's an attempted murder in there!" The officer, a tired sergeant, looked at the ring in Mr. Thorne's hand, now properly sealed in a plastic bag, and then at the dishevelled, hysterical cleaner. "Ma'am, was the ring in your purse?" "It was, but I didn't do it," Sadie tried to explain, tears streaming down her face. "Lorraine Galloway is going to give her stepson a potassium injection tonight. I heard her. You need to go in there. Do you have a warrant? Go in there." Mr. Thorne intervened, his voice soft and polite. "Sergeant, this young woman was caught red-handed, stealing a jewel worth $15,000, and now she's inventing this absurd fantasy. Lorraine Galloway is a respectable lady, a city benefactor." The officer sighed. On one side, the word of millionaires in an estate. On the other, a cleaner caught with the stolen item. The law was blind, but sometimes it stumbled over physical evidence. "Ma'am, turn around. Hands on your head." "No, you can't take me." Sadie resisted when Officer Tate grabbed the handcuffs. "If you take me, he'll die. He'll die today. His name is Sterling. Save him." "Calm down, ma'am. You'll be able to explain everything to the detective. Now cooperate, or it'll be worse." The cold click of the handcuffs closing on Sadie's wrists was the most terrifying sound she had ever heard. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on Hope. They pushed her into the back seat of the patrol car, that cramped cage, the smell of metal and burnt rubber. As the car pulled away from the mansion, Sadie pressed her face against the grated window. She saw the third-floor window. The light was off. She imagined Sterling inside, alone, in the dark, with the pain from his pricked finger, and with a cell phone hidden behind his head. "God," she sobbed, hitting her forehead against the glass. "Give him strength. He only has that cell phone. And you." At the estate, Lorraine watched the patrol car leave from the living room window, sipping the last of her wine. "Problem solved," she told Bryce, who appeared in the room wearing black surgical gloves. "Is the cleaner gone for good?" he asked eagerly. "Arrested. She'll spend the weekend in the slammer until her arraignment. No one will hear her screams in the cell." Lorraine glanced at the grandfather clock in the hall. 6:30 p.m. The sun had set. The house was plunged into shadow. "We'll wait until it's quite late. At 9 o'clock we'll go upstairs. There's time for dinner." She turned to her son, her eyes gleaming with greed. "Prepare the cocktail, Bryce, and don't skimp on the dose. I want it to look like a massive heart attack." Upstairs in his quarters, Sterling felt the pain in his finger and the pain in his chest. The silence was absolute. His hope had vanished with that siren. But then he remembered. He rolled his eyes back as far as he could. There, hidden between the mattress and the bed frame, Sadie's cell phone's small green light blinked in the dark. It was his only weapon, but he had no hands to use it. He only had his voice. That gurgling voice that barely came out. And her promise, "If you make a noise, the phone will activate." He needed to make noise. He needed to activate that assistant before Lorraine came in with the syringe. He began to gather saliva in his mouth. He started to force air through his paralyzed lungs, trying to create a vibration. It was 2.5 hours until 9 o'clock. The final countdown had begun. The smell of the women's holding cell was a sour mix of mold, dried sweat, and cheap pine disinfectant that stung the back of her nose. Sadie was sitting on the cold cement floor, hugging her knees to her chest. Her wrists still throbbed where the metal handcuffs had tightened against her skin. Hours had passed. She had no watch. Her cell phone had been left at the estate, the good news, and was now in police custody, the usual problem. But she knew night had already fallen outside. The darkness filtering through the small barred window high on the wall confirmed her worst nightmare. "Sterling," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying during the first few hours. "Hold on tight. Please, don't give up." The silence of the district precinct was broken by the jingle of keys and heavy boots. A fat, ill-tempered jailer struck the bars with a rubber baton. "Attorney visit, madame." "Get up." Sadie sprang to her feet, her numb legs tingling. Her heart pounded. She was led in handcuffs to the visitation room. Separated by a dirty, fingerprint-smudged pane of glass, stood a short, bald man wearing a grey suit that seemed 2 sizes too big for him. Beside him, biting his nails and covered in grease, was Cal. Cal was a neighbour from the flats, a motorcycle mechanic who had liked Sadie since childhood. His eyes were red. "Cal!" Sadie pressed her palm against the glass. "For God's sake, get me out of here. They're going to kill Sterling today, tonight." "Calm down, Sadie," Cal said, his voice trembling. "This is Attorney Fletcher. He's a 2-bit lawyer, but he's good." The attorney cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "Miss Sadie, the situation is complicated. The detective filed the immediate arrest report. Aggravated theft, breach of trust. The detective on duty wanted to hold you until the custody hearing on Monday." Sadie felt the world spin. Monday? Sterling would be buried on Monday. "But," the attorney raised a finger, "I managed to convince the night duty judge to set provisional release with bail. I argued that you have a fixed address, no prior convictions, and care for an elderly grandmother." "How much?" Sadie asked, her heart pounding. $2,000. Sadie felt her legs give out. She grabbed the counter to keep from falling. She didn't have $50, let alone $1,250. "I don't have that, attorney," she whispered, defeated. "I sold the motorcycle, Sadie," Cal said quickly, pressing his forehead against the glass. "I just sold the motorcycle to Gus a little while ago. He paid $1,125 cash on the barrelhead. I made up the rest with my rent money and borrowed $50 from my mom." Sadie looked at her friend. The motorcycle was his livelihood. It was his life. He made deliveries, he hustled, he took his mom to the doctor on the back. "Cal, I can't accept. It's your motorcycle." "Shut up and sign the paper," Cal said, his eyes watery but firm. "I know you're innocent. I've known you since we jumped rope on the dirt road, and I know someone out there needs you. Go save the man. We'll figure out how to pay later." Sadie signed the papers, trembling. The attorney left to file the payment with the clerk. The wait for the paperwork was the greatest torture of Sadie Miller's life. Every minute felt like a drawn-out hour. She paced back and forth in the waiting room, gnawing at the skin on her finger until it bled. The round clock on the precinct wall read 8:15 p.m. Hurry up, she murmured. When the jailer finally opened the exit door and returned her belongings, Sadie Miller did not walk. She ran. She stepped out onto the precinct sidewalk, inhaling the night air, as if it were the first time she had ever breathed. "Hop on the back," Cal shouted. He was on an old, beat-up motorcycle, which he had borrowed from a cousin just to pick her up. "Take me to the estate, Cal. Fly." Sadie Miller got on the motorcycle, not even caring about the loose helmet. "Hold on tight." The motorcycle roared to life, tires squealing, spewing smoke. Sadie Miller looked up at the dark, starless sky. "Don't die, Sterling. I'm coming." At the estate, the silence was absolute and unnatural. Lorraine was in the kitchen wearing a black silk robe. She was finishing dismissing the last employee, the cook, gently nudging her toward the door. "You can all go, all of you," Lorraine said with a rigid smile. "My son and I are ordering Japanese food, and we want complete privacy tonight. I don't want anyone around." "What about the gate security, Lorraine?" the cook asked. "After today's robbery, I've already dismissed them too," Lorraine lied, double-locking the door as soon as the woman left. "I activated the perimeter alarm myself. I want the house empty. No witnesses, no prying eyes." She turned to Bryce, who was leaning against the marble island wearing black surgical gloves. "All right, we're alone. If the alarm goes off, the security company will call me before sending anyone. And I'll say it was a false alarm. We have total control." In the third-floor room, the only light came from the digital clock on the nightstand. 8:30 p.m. Sterling looked at the changing red numbers. 8:31 p.m. 8:32 p.m. Every minute that passed was a step closer to the abyss. His finger, pricked earlier, throbbed with a constant beat, synchronized with his fear. He tried. God knows how hard he tried to activate the hidden cell phone. He gathered air in his throat and released it all at once, trying to make his vocal cords vibrate. Grrr. The sound came out low, wet, a gurgle like someone drowning on dry land. He waited. Would the small green light on the cell phone behind the bed turn on? Would the assistant say, "I didn't understand"? Nothing. Silence. The mattress and the headboard wood muffled the faint sound he produced. Louder. It needs to be louder, he thought, panic turning into despair. He tried to clench his teeth. Clack, clack. Too weak. His jaw was rigid from tension. The weapon was there, 12 inches from his head, and he couldn't pull the trigger. It was the ultimate torture. Downstairs, Bryce was preparing the final solution. On the cutting board, a small glass vial with a clear liquid and a large veterinary-grade syringe. "Pure potassium," Bryce said, smiling. "Google said it's foolproof. Cardiac arrest in 30 seconds. Undetectable unless a specific toxicology screen is performed. And since he's a terminal patient, no one will request an autopsy. The family doctor will sign the death certificate as cardiorespiratory failure." Lorraine was taking the last sip of her wine, looking at her reflection in the dark window. "Are you sure the dose is correct?" "It's doubled, Mother, just to be sure." Lorraine placed the glass in the sink. "Let's go then. The attorney messaged me. It's 3 hours until midnight. If he makes it through the day alive, the audit starts Monday, and we're going to the slammer. Let's get this over with." Bryce drew the liquid into the syringe. The needle was thick. He flicked the plastic to remove the air bubbles. "Bye, bro." They started climbing the stairs. Unrushed, like masters of destiny. Cal's motorcycle tore down the avenue, weaving through traffic, passing between cars. "Faster, Cal! Blow through the red light!" Sadie shouted in his ear, her tears drying in the wind. They arrived on the mansion street at 8:45 p.m. The street was tree-lined and dark. "Stop here," Sadie shouted, hitting his shoulder. "Don't stop in front of the gate. There's a camera. Stop at the corner." Cal braked sharply. Sadie jumped off the motorcycle before it had even fully stopped, almost falling. "Sadie, what are you going to do?" "Break in." "You'll get arrested again, and I lost my motorcycle," Cal shouted, scared. "If I get arrested, at least I tried. Go home, Cal. Don't get involved. Thanks for everything." Sadie ran along the dark sidewalk, hiding behind the trees. The mansion's wall was high, made of stone, covered in ivy. At the top, the electric fence hummed softly, but Sadie knew a blind spot. She had seen the gardener working in the back days earlier. There was an old tree, a huge flamboyant, whose thick branches passed dangerously close to the electric fence. The gardener had mentioned that section of the fence was constantly shorting out and shutting down on its own. She ran to the back, where the estate grounds bordered a preserved woods. The brush was tall, scratching her legs. She found the tree. The trunk was rough. Sadie had never climbed a tree in her adult life, but the adrenaline transformed her. She took off her sneakers to get better grip with her bare feet. She climbed, scraping her arms, tearing her inmate uniform. She reached the branch that touched the wall. Below, the estate garden was dark and silent. Sadie looked at the electric fence wires. Whatever God wills. She passed through the wires with surgical care. There was no crackle. The section was indeed off or burned out. She jumped from the wall onto the lawn. The drop was almost 10 feet. She landed awkwardly, rolling on the soft grass. She felt a sharp pain in her right ankle, but the adrenaline immediately masked the pain. She got up limping and ran toward the house. She stopped at a garden construction site and filled her hand with dirt and coarse sand. It was the only weapon she had. Sadie went around the house, heading for the back kitchen door. It was locked, double-tempered glass. She looked up. The third-floor window, Sterling's quarters, was lit now. A shadow passed by the curtain. "They're already there," she thought, panic tightening her throat like a physical hand. She needed to get in. Now. She saw a decorative garden stone, white and heavy. She picked up the stone with both hands. 1, 2... She counted, taking a deep breath. 3! She threw the stone with all the strength of her small body against the glass of the service door. Crash! The sound of shattering glass ripped through the night. Immediately, the alarm blared. A deafening siren. Woo, 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 woo! Upstairs in the room, Lorraine and Bryce jumped in fright. Bryce already had the syringe positioned in the intravenous access of Sterling's arm. "What the hell is that?" Bryce yelled, almost dropping the syringe. "The alarm! Someone broke a window!" Lorraine ran to the control panel in the hallway, just outside the room. "Turn it off!" Bryce shouted. "The neighbors will call the police!" Lorraine frantically typed the password. The noise stopped. The silence returned, even heavier. "It was in the kitchen," Lorraine said, returning to the room pale. "It must be a cat, or that damn cleaner came back." "She's locked up, Mum," Bryce said, sweating. "Forget about it, let's just finish this." "I'll go downstairs to check," Lorraine said, grabbing a heavy metal letter opener from the nearby desk in the study. "You finish up here. Inject it now. Now." Bryce turned his attention to the syringe. His thumb went to the plunger. Sterling saw the needle. He saw the liquid. He heard the alarm sound and then stop. He knew the silence was his chance now, if Sadie was there. But Bryce was pressing the plunger. Sadie had entered through the broken window as soon as the alarm stopped. She knew they had turned it off so as not to attract the police before the job was done. She climbed the stairs 2 steps at a time, ignoring the pain in her swollen ankle. She reached the second-floor hallway and saw a red fire extinguisher hanging on the wall. She couldn't carry the entire extinguisher while running. It was too heavy. She kept running, her hand full of garden sand. She reached the third-floor hallway. Bryce, hearing the quick, heavy footsteps on the stairs, had stepped out of the room to see, leaving the syringe on the nightstand for a second. "Who's there?" he yelled. Sadie appeared around the bend in the hallway. Dirty, disheveled, her feet bleeding. "You!" Bryce's eyes widened. "How did you get out?" "Get away from him!" Sadie shouted, charging like a bull. Bryce laughed. He was twice her size. "Did you come to die with him? Great. Makes transporting the bodies easier." He lunged forward to punch her. Sadie didn't stop. As he wound up his punch, she threw the handful of coarse sand and dirt directly into his eyes with force. "Ah, my eye!" Bryce roared, clutching his face, instantly blinded by the sand that scratched his corneas. He started punching the air, blind. Sadie ducked down, passing under his arm, and shoved him with her shoulder. Off balance and sightless, Bryce tripped on the hallway rug and fell heavily, hitting his head on the corner of the side table. He lay on the floor, groaning, stunned. Sadie didn't look back. She ran to the bedroom door. Lorraine was inside. She had returned to the room upon hearing the struggle. She saw her son fallen. She saw the housekeeper enter. Lorraine rushed to the nightstand and grabbed the syringe. "If he won't inject it, I will!" Lorraine screamed, hysterical. "No!" Sadie threw herself onto the bed, sliding over Sterling's legs, and slapped Lorraine's hand. The syringe flew away, hitting the wall and falling behind a cabinet. The precious liquid was lost. Lorraine let out a scream of pure hatred. She looked at Sadie, who was now standing between the bed and her, panting, protecting Sterling with her own body. "You wretched gutter rat!" Lorraine screamed. She still held the letter opener in her other hand, a solid metal blade, sharp as a dagger. "It's over, Lorraine," Sadie said, extending her arms to protect Sterling. "The police are coming." The alarm went off. "I turned off the alarm." Lorraine smiled, a maniacal grin. "No one is coming. It's just us. And I'm going to bleed you right here. I'll say you broke in, killed my son in the hallway, killed my stepson, and I had to defend myself. It will be perfect. Lorraine lunged forward with the letter opener raised. Sadie looked around. There was no weapon. There was nowhere to run. Behind her, Sterling cried, his eyes fixed on her in total panic. He saw the woman he loved about to be killed because of him. Sadie did not back down. She planted her feet on the floor. "You'll have to stab me first," she said. Lorraine attacked. Sadie managed to grab Lorraine's wrist in midair. They struggled. Lorraine was stronger than she appeared, fueled by the adrenaline of impending ruin. She pushed Sadie, who hit her back against the wall, losing her breath. Lorraine raised the blade again for the final blow to Sadie's chest. The room was silent. Only their ragged breathing could be heard. Sadie knew she was going to die. But then she remembered. The cell phone. Behind Sterling's head. It was connected. It was listening. The alarm was off. The silence was perfect. Lorraine began to lower her arm. Sadie didn't try to stop her. She filled her lungs with all the air she had left, and instead of screaming for help, she yelled at the headboard with the clearest and loudest voice she could project. "Okay, Google! Call the police on speakerphone." Lorraine froze the blade in midair, confused for a split second. Behind the bed, there was a loud and clear electronic beep. And then the assistant's robotic voice filled the silent room. "Calling 911. The ringing began. Ring, ring. Lorraine froze. Fear replaced the hatred in her eyes. "Emergency services, this is 911. The operator's voice came out loud and clear through the hidden cell phone speaker. The voice of the 911 dispatcher echoed through the silent room, coming from the small speaker of the cell phone, hidden behind the headboard. It was a metallic, distorted voice, but for Sadie and Sterling, it sounded like the voice of an angel. 911, what's your emergency? Hello, we're hearing screams. Is anyone there? Lorraine froze. Time seemed to stand still. The solid metal letter opener was still raised in her right hand, ready to descend and tear Sadie's skin, but her arms seemed to have lost connection with her brain. Her face, which seconds before had been contorted into a mask of hatred and murderous fury, now drained of color, turning as white as the wall behind her. She looked at the headboard, at that invisible spot behind the mattress, as if the cell phone were a ghost that had just materialized. "You," Lorraine whispered, her voice trembling, almost inaudible. "You recorded everything." Sadie, still panting, her chest heaving violently and her back pressed against the cold wall, did not let her guard down. She knew that a wounded animal is the most dangerous. She did not respond to Lorraine. Instead, she filled her lungs again and screamed into the receiver, ensuring that every word would be recorded on the police servers. "Help! The estate on Sycamore Ridge, number 400. The lady of the house, Lorraine Galloway, tried to kill her stepson with a poison injection. She is armed with a knife. She is going to kill me. Send a patrol car, now." The response came quickly and firmly. "Ma'am, stay calm. Patrol cars have already been dispatched due to the intrusion alarm. They are arriving at the location. Stay on the line and do not hang up." The sound of that confirmation was like a punch to Lorraine's stomach. The letter opener slipped from her sweaty fingers. The metal hit the polished hardwood floor with a hollow, final sound. Clack, she knew. It was over. The incriminating evidence was recorded. The threat, the confession about the alarm being disabled, the intent to kill. Everything was in the cloud. Bryce appeared at the bedroom door at that moment. He was a deplorable sight. His face was red and swollen, tears and mucus streaming from his nose as he rubbed his eyes, full of sand and dirt. He staggered, fumbling for the doorframe like a panicked blind man. "Mom!" he cried out, his voice broken by the painful sobs. "Mom, where are you? I heard the siren. I heard the police talking. Let's run! Help me!" Lorraine looked at her son, who now seemed like a frightened, pathetic child, then looked at Sadie, the housekeeper she had judged to be an easy insect to crush, and finally her eyes landed on Sterling. Sterling Vance was crying. But these were no longer the tears of panic and helplessness he had shed for 2 years. They were tears of relief, of vengeance. He looked at Lorraine with an intensity that seemed to burn her skin. If eyes could kill, Lorraine would have dropped dead right there. "Run where, you idiot?" Lorraine said with a terrifying calm, the calm of someone accepting the guillotine. The cell phone was on the entire time. At that exact moment, the sound of real sirens invaded the room. Not through the phone, but through the window. Sadie had broken downstairs and through the bedroom windows. The sound grew, filling the street outside. Red and blue lights began to dance on the bedroom walls, illuminating Lorraine's pale face like a macabre neon sign. The sound of car doors slamming downstairs was followed by heavy footsteps ascending the main staircase. They were tactical boots. Deep voices shouted orders. "Police! Hands on your head! Clear! Move up! Move up!" Lorraine walked slowly to the velvet armchair in the corner of the room and sat down. She crossed her legs, adjusted her silk robe, and lifted her chin. She tried to maintain the posture of a queen, of the owner of the world, even with the castle crumbling around her. Sadie slid down the wall to the floor, her legs finally giving out, now that the adrenaline was starting to subside. She crawled to the bed and held Sterling's hand. "It's over, Mr. Sterling," she sobbed, kissing his cold hand repeatedly, mixing her tears with his sweat. "It's over. They're here. No one will touch you anymore." 3 police officers stormed into the room with weapons drawn, sweeping the area with tactical precision. "Hands on your heads! Everyone, freeze!" the sergeant yelled, his authoritative voice making the windows vibrate. The scene they found was a portrait of chaos. Bryce fallen and moaning in the hallway, blind and helpless. Lorraine seated in the armchair with a glazed, arrogant stare. And Sadie, covered in dirt, blood and sweat, kneeling beside the bed of an immobile man. "It was her!" Lorraine tried, in a last act of desperation and manipulation, rising from the armchair. She pointed her perfectly manicured finger at Sadie. "This crazy housekeeper invaded my home. She drugged my son with some chemical. She was going to kill Sterling. I was only trying to protect my stepson. Arrest her." The sergeant looked at Sadie. Her appearance worked against her. Torn clothes, dirt marks, her arm bleeding where the glass cut her. She looked like the aggressor in a street fight. "Ma'am, step away from the bed," the officer ordered Sadie, pointing his weapon at her chest. "Hands where I can see them." "No!" Sadie yelled, raising her open hands, but refusing to let go of Sterling's bedrail. "You don't understand. The cell phone behind the bed. Get the cell phone. The dispatcher heard everything. She confessed." One of the younger officers cautiously walked around the bed to the headboard. He retrieved Sadie's cell phone, which was still lit up. The emergency call was still active, the timer running. "Dispatch? This is Unit 04. Officer Tate on the line." The officer spoke into the device, holding it to his ear. Everyone in the room held their breath. "Affirmative 04. Situation under control. The caller reported attempted homicide by the owner. The recorded audio confirms an imminent death threat and a confession of intentionally disabling the alarm. The caller requested assistance against a bladed weapon." The dispatcher's voice was loud enough for the sergeant to hear. The sergeant lowered the weapon he was pointing at Sadie. He looked at the floor and saw the heavy letter opener lying near Lorraine's feet. He saw the syringe lying in the opposite corner. He turned to Lorraine, his face hardened. "Ms. Lorraine Galloway?" Lorraine raised her chin, defiant. "That's me, and I demand to speak with my attorney. This is outrageous. You are being arrested in the act for attempted aggravated murder and unlawful imprisonment." The sergeant took the handcuffs from his belt. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Lorraine did not resist when the cold metal closed on her wrists, but she did not lower her head. "You will regret this," she hissed. "My attorney will ruin your careers. Do you know who you're talking to? Bryce was handcuffed on the floor, screaming that he was blind, that his eyes were burning. The paramedics, who had been waiting for the area to be cleared, rushed into the room. "Let's take the patient," a paramedic said, approaching Sterling with the stretcher. "Quick assessment. Pupils reactive?" "Be careful with his arm," Sadie warned, trying to stand up, but feeling a strong dizziness. "He has an IV line. They were going to inject poison. Don't use that line." The paramedic checked the line and saw that it was intact, but empty. He nodded at Sadie. Lorraine, being led out escorted by 2 officers, stopped at the doorway. She looked at Sadie with such deep hatred that it seemed capable of freezing hell. "You may have won today, you gutter rat," she said loud and clear, "but remember, he's a vegetable. He will never confirm your story. Tomorrow I'll get out of the slammer on bail and say that you set everything up, that you edited the audio. Who's going to say otherwise? The mute one there?" Lorraine's venomous comment made the sergeant stop in the middle of the hallway. It was an uncomfortable legal truth. Without a signed confession or the victim's testimony, an expensive attorney could create reasonable doubt. They could claim the recording was taken out of context, that Sadie trespassed, and Lorraine reacted in self-defense. The sergeant looked at Sterling in the bed. The man looked like a statue. "Doesn't he speak at all?" the officer asked Sadie. "Does he have no reaction?" Sadie stood up, ignoring the pain in her ankle. She wiped the blood from her arm on her dirty clothes and walked to the bed, making her way through the paramedics. "He speaks," Sadie said firmly, her voice choked with emotion. "Not with his mouth, not like us, but he speaks, and he has a lot to say." She leaned over Sterling's face. The world stopped in that room. There were no more sirens, no more police, no more villains, just the 2 of them. "Sterling," Sadie said, looking deep into those brown eyes she had learned to read. "The witch said you don't exist. She said you're a vegetable with no memory. Show them. Show everyone who owns this house." She held his face with both hands. "Blink for me, Sterling." The room fell into absolute silence. All the police officers, the paramedics with the stretcher halted, and even Lorraine, craning her neck from the doorway, looked at the man in the bed. Sterling took a deep breath. He felt the air fill his lungs. He used every ounce of oxygen to fuel his brain. He focused on Lorraine. He blinked, once, hard, slow. "That's a reflex, it's a spasm," Lorraine shouted, trying to break free. "He does that all the time." "No, it's not," Sadie said, without taking her eyes off him. "Sterling, did your stepmother Lorraine try to kill you today? Blink once for yes." Sterling blinked, long, holding his eye closed for a full second before opening it. A resounding yes. "Do you want her to go to jail and never come back?" Sterling blinked, and his eyes narrowed into an expression of rage, so human, so lucid, that the younger officer took a step back, startled by the intensity. But Sterling was not satisfied. Just blinking was not enough for that woman. He needed to get that weight off his chest. He needed to seal her fate. He felt the adrenaline of near death coursing through his blood like rocket fuel. He felt Sadie's warm hand on his face. He opened his mouth. His vocal cords, dry and atrophied from 2 years of absolute silence, vibrated with a titanic effort. The sound started in his diaphragm, rose, tearing at his throat like ground glass. "Eh," he groaned. The sound was low, hoarse. Lorraine's eyes widened, pale. "Sup!" Sterling forced out his face, turning red with effort, the veins in his neck bulging, the heart monitor blaring its alarm. "Murderer!" The sound escaped, hoarse, guttural, distorted. It sounded like a monster emerging from a deep cave, but it was a word, unmistakable, heavy, definitive. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Lorraine lost her color. Her knees buckled, and she had to be held by the officers to keep from collapsing to the floor like a sack of potatoes. The sergeant looked at Sterling with solemn respect. He adjusted his cap. "I believe that's a valid testimony," the sergeant said, looking at Lorraine with contempt. "Take her away, now, and make sure the press sees her face." As Lorraine was dragged out, shouting disconnected obscenities, Sadie collapsed onto Sterling's chest, crying copiously, embracing him as if she wanted to merge with him. Sterling Vance, exhausted by the superhuman effort, closed his eyes, but the paramedics saw he was smiling, a crooked, small smile, trembling at the corner of his mouth, but the first genuine smile in 730 days of hell. The scene in front of the estate looked like a Hollywood movie. Flashing lights illuminated the imposing facade. Neighbors in pajamas gathered on the sidewalk, whispering. The press, which always arrives quickly at scandals in affluent districts, was already positioned with cameras and microphones. The front door opened. Lorraine emerged in handcuffs, escorted by 2 police officers. She tried to cover her face with her hair, but the flashes exploded relentlessly. "Murderer!" someone shouted from the crowd. "Coward!" shouted another. The crowd booed. Her mask of respectability had fallen forever. Soon after, Bryce was taken to the ambulance under police custody with a wet towel on his face, screaming from the pain in his eyes. And then Sterling Vance's stretcher was brought out. He was covered with a golden thermal blanket. Beside the gurney, clinging to the metal rail, was Sadie. Dirty, limping, with her arm temporarily bandaged, she looked like a warrior returning from battle. The EMT tried to block her at the ambulance door. "Ma'am, only family members can accompany." Sadie froze. She was nothing on paper. "She's coming," Sterling groaned. The sound was faint, but the doctor heard it. The doctor looked at the housekeeper, looked at the millionaire on the gurney, and understood everything. "All right, she's coming. Get in, miss." Sadie got into the ambulance. The doors closed, isolating them from the circus outside. The silence of the aseptic cabin was comforting. The ambulance pulled away. Sadie sat on the bench beside the gurney and held Sterling's hand. "We did it," she whispered, caressing his face, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "You're free. The nightmare is over." Sterling looked at her. He no longer had the strength to speak. The effort of that single word had drained his energy. But he wanted to thank her. He needed to touch her. He focused all his will on his right hand, the same hand that had been pierced. He felt Sadie's fingers intertwined with his. He could not lift his hand, but he managed to squeeze. It was a light squeeze, a controlled spasm. His index finger and thumb pressed against her hand. Sadie felt it. She looked at their joined hands. He squeezed again. 1, 2. It was the code. "No! No!" Sadie looked at him, confused. "No what, Sterling?" He squeezed once. Long. "Yes!" And then, with his eyes, he pointed at her and then at himself. "You and I." Sadie understood. He was not saying no. He was saying he would not let her go. Never again. She rested her forehead against his and cried with happiness as the siren cleared the way for a new life. 1 month later, the image of a newspaper lying on a glass table bore the headline, "Black Widow and Son, sentenced to 20 years for attempted murder and multi-million-dollar fraud. Heir regains control of the empire." Sterling Vance was at a private clinic in Switzerland. He was in a heated physical therapy pool. The water supported his body. Sadie Miller was in the water with him, holding his torso. He moved his arms in the water, laughing. It was a soundless laugh, but full of joy. 6 months later, Sadie was sitting in a classroom, wearing a white lab coat. She was studying nursing and diligently taking notes. At the estate, workers were installing accessibility ramps made of fine wood at the entrance. The dark and mouldy third-floor room was being emptied. The heavy curtains were discarded. Sterling Vance was now sleeping on the ground floor in a spacious room with glass doors opening onto the garden. He was sitting in a motorized wheelchair, moving the joystick with his right hand, chasing Sadie Miller through the garden in a game of tag. A year later, Sterling was in a company boardroom. He spoke into the microphone. His voice was still slow, paused, but firm and authoritative. Anyone who does not respect the cleaning staff is fired today. The suited executives lowered their heads, ashamed. A year and 4 months later, Sadie arrived home from college at night, tired. The garden lights were off. Suddenly, twinkling lights lit up in the trees. Sterling was waiting on the porch. He held a small velvet box with his left hand. He trembled slightly, but opened the box himself. It was not a vulgar, gigantic diamond ring like Lorraine's. It was a delicate ring of fine gold with a blue topaz stone. He said, "Do you want to be my voice forever?" Exactly 2 years had passed since that bloody Friday night. The estate's garden was unrecognizable. Where electric fences and shadows once stood, there were now beds of white roses, ivy arches, and gilded chairs lined up under the soft afternoon sun. It was packed, but not with fake self-serving socialites. It was full of real people. The manufacturing plant employees, Sadie's nursing school classmates, the neighbors from the flats, and Cal, who was in the front row, crying profusely in a new suit that Sterling had given him as a gift. The music began to play. A soft violin. Sadie appeared at the beginning of the grassy aisle. She was stunning. She wasn't wearing an exaggerated, structured princess gown. She wore a flowing white silk dress, simple and elegant, that highlighted her natural, humble beauty. In her loose hair, only a small floral crown. She walked down the aisle. Her smile shone brighter than the sun. Her gaze was fixed on a single point, the altar. There, Sterling awaited her. He was seated in his wheelchair, dressed in an impeccable navy blue tuxedo. He looked healthy, strong, his face flushed and full of life. When Sadie reached within 6 feet of the altar, the music stopped. A silence of anticipation fell over the guests. Sterling locked the wheels of his chair with an audible click. He placed both hands on the armrests of the chair. His arms trembled. The muscles in his neck tensed. Cal made a move to stand and help, but Sterling shook his head quickly. No, he needed to do this himself. It was his marathon. With a supreme effort, concentrating 2 years of pain, sweat, and tears into those seconds, Sterling pushed his body upward. He stood. His legs trembled visibly. He had to lean on a wooden cane that was propped against the chair, but he was standing, upright, tall, looking Sadie in the eyes, at the same height, as an equal. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Sadie brought her hands to her mouth, tears streaming uncontrollably. He extended his free hand to her. She ran the last few feet and embraced him, also serving as support, burying her face in his neck. "You stood up," she sobbed against his chest. "You stood up to receive the woman who raised me from the dead," he whispered in her ear, his voice clear, crisp, and without a stutter. The priest moved, smiled, and began the ceremony. When it was time for the vows, Sterling picked up the microphone. His hand was steady. "I had everything," he began, his voice echoing in the garden. "Money, cars, fame, power. But when I fell into that bed, I discovered I had nothing. I became an object, a problem to be managed." He paused, looking at the guests. "No one saw me. They cleaned my body, but they didn't look into my eyes. I screamed inside, and the world was deaf." He turned to Sadie, holding her hands. "Until you arrived. You, with your worn grey uniform and your hands calloused from bleach. You didn't see the millionaire. You didn't see the vegetable. You saw Sterling. You asked permission to enter my pain. You covered me with your only coat when I was cold. You were my voice when I was only silence." Sadie was crying, squeezing his hands, unable to speak. "Sadie, You didn't just save my life that night, you saved my soul. All the money I have in the bank cannot pay for a single minute of the time you spent reading that pirate book to me while I stared at the ceiling. I love you, not out of gratitude, not because you owe me anything, but because I am finally the man you saw I could be, even when I couldn't see it myself. He slid the ring onto her finger. I promise to love you, respect you, and listen to you every day of my life, and I promise that my voice will always be used to uplift you. Sadie took the microphone, her voice trembling. I promise to take care of you, she said, smiling through her tears. In sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty, and I promise that I will never ever let anyone hurt you again. They kissed. It was a passionate, long, cinematic kiss. A kiss that sealed the victory of love over greed, of humanity over cruelty. The guests erupted in applause. Cal whistled loudly and tossed his hat into the air. Far from there, in a grey, damp environment, the sound of an iron gate clanging echoed. Lorraine was wearing a worn-out inmate uniform without makeup, her hair grey and dishevelled. She looked as if she had aged 20 years. She was on her knees, scrubbing the filthy cement floor of a communal cell with a grimy cloth. A corrections officer yelled, "Clean it properly, 402. You're drooling on the floor. I want to see my reflection in that floor." Lorraine looked up. In the reflection of a dirty puddle, she saw what she had become. Her gaze was one of complete defeat. Did you enjoy this story? Do you think Lorraine got what she deserved? Do you think Sadie did the right thing? Let me know in the comments. Until the next story.